I am the son of man. I just killed the man of sin. Bomb that chilling 9/11 call is now at the center of one of Hollywood's darkest stories. Veteran actor James Handy, known for Top Gun, Maverick, Jumanji, and dozens of iconic TV shows, was allegedly collated inside a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood at Vassar years old. But what shocked people even more wasn't just the crime itself. It was who police say was responsible. According to reports, the suspect was the son of Handy's girlfriend, and the disturbing words he allegedly told dispatchers have now sent the internet into complete speculation mode. As fans revisit James Handy's long Hollywood career, many are realizing they had seen his face for decades without ever knowing his name, and the deeper this story gets, the stranger it becomes. Fondes. It started like a normal morning in Tarzana, until everything suddenly went silent. Blamb on June 3rd, 9/11 dispatchers received a call that immediately stood out, not just because of what was said, but how it was said. The voice on the line delivered a chilling message that would later define the entire case. Within minutes, police rushed to a quiet residential street in Los Angeles. Neighbors had no idea that something this serious was unfolding just a few doors away. Banned. When officers arrived, they found veteran actor James Handy outside the home, critically injured and unresponsive. Paramedics were called immediately, but despite their efforts, he was later pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. What made the scene even more disturbing was the behavior reported at the location, and the fact that the situation wasn't over when police arrived. Because, according to the person tied to the call was still nearby, and what he did next would leave officers completely stunned. At first glance, James Handy was the kind of actor most people recognized without even realizing it. He wasn't always the headline star, but for decades, he was everywhere in Hollywood. Lemmed from Top Gun, Maverick to Wooder Jumanji Ditas, and appearances in shows like Clenches, Los Angeles Ditas, Criminal Minds Dita, The X-Files Dita, and Lop Law and Order Dice Handy, built a career as one of those familiar faces you'd see again and again on screen. He played bartenders, detectives, officials, and background characters who quietly helped shape some of the biggest TV dramas of multiple generations. But behind that steady Hollywood presence was a long, quiet career that never chased fame, just consistency. And that's what makes this story hit harder. Because while millions had seen his face for years, very few actually knew the man behind it. And what was happening in his private life right before this tragedy is where things start to take an even darker turn. As the investigation moved forward, attention quickly shifted to one name, Michael Gledhill. According to reports, Gledhill was living at the same residence with his mother, who was allegedly in a relationship with James Handy. It was a tense family dynamic that, until now, had stayed completely out of public view. Armed police say that after the incident, Gledhill didn't attempt to flee in the way most people would expect. Instead, something far more he allegedly approached officers at the scene and identified himself as the person they were looking for. Even more disturbing was the content of the 9/11 call that came in before police arrived, a message filled with strange, religiously charged language that quickly spread online and sparked intense speculation about his mental state. But investigators have been careful with their wording, saying this appears to be an isolated incident, not a wider threat to the public. And yet, despite the arrest being made so quickly, the biggest question still remains unanswered: what led to this moment in the first place? As soon as the news broke, the internet didn't wait for official answers. It started building its own theories. And clips of James Handy's past roles resurfaced everywhere, with fans realizing they had seen him in dozens of major shows for years without ever knowing his name. That sudden recognition quickly turned into shock, and then curiosity. lawn. But the focus soon shifted to the strange details surrounding the incident. Bent the Jolbai Isher Ikal, especially the unusual religious wording, became the center of online discussion. People began speculating about what could have triggered such behavior, while others pointed out that nothing had been officially confirmed about motive or mental state. At the same time, rumors and unverified claims started spreading across social media, with users trying to piece together connections between the suspect, the household dynamics, and the events leading up to that morning. Still, authorities have released very little beyond basic facts, leaving a gap that the internet was more than willing to fill. And as speculation grew louder, one thing became clear: this wasn't just a crime story anymore. It had turned into a full-blown online mystery. As the story spread, something unexpected started happening online. People weren't just talking about the case anymore, they were rediscovering James Handy himself. Banda fans began posting clips from old shows, realizing he had appeared in some of the biggest series of the last few decades. For many, it was a strange moment of recognition, that feeling of "I know" this face suddenly turning into "I never knew his name." And that's what made the reaction so powerful. Beyond, Handy wasn't a typical headline star, but he was one of those actors who quietly built Hollywood's backbone, showing up in hit after hit, episode after episode, across generations of television and film. Now, in the middle of tragedy, his career was being seen in a completely different light. Almost like people were finally paying attention too late. And just as that realization was sinking in, another unsettling detail from the scene began to spread, one that made the entire story feel even more disturbing. As more information came out, it wasn't just the incident itself that unsettled people, it was the way it unfolded in real time. Reports say the suspect didn't attempt to disappear or deny involvement when officers arrived. Instead, he reportedly flagged them down at the scene and identified himself, a detail that immediately raised more questions than answers. At the same time, authorities described the situation as isolated, emphasizing there was no ongoing threat to the public. But that official reassurance did little to calm the growing unease online. Because people couldn't stop focusing on the contrast. A quiet residential neighborhood, a well-known Hollywood actor, and a sudden burst of violence that seemed to come out of nowhere. And even with an arrest made, the biggest piece of the puzzle still wasn't clear. The true motive behind what happened that morning remained a mystery. What made this story explode online wasn't just the tragedy itself. It was the combination of everything surrounding it. A familiar Hollywood face from decades of iconic shows and films. A sudden, violent incident in a quiet neighborhood. And a set of strange, unsettling details that no one could fully explain yet. People weren't just reacting to the news, they were reacting to recognition. James Handy wasn't a global superstar, but he was someone audiences had unknowingly watched for years. That connection made the shock feel more personal. Then came the viral layer, the Job Isher call, the unusual wording, and the unanswered questions about motive. Social media turned it into a puzzle, with theories spreading faster than official updates. And that's why this story didn't fade like a typical headline, it lingered. Because it left people with one haunting thought: how someone you've seen your whole life on screen can disappear from the world in a single morning, which in the end, this story isn't just about a single tragic morning in Los Angeles. It's about how quickly familiar faces can slip into headlines no one ever expected. James Handy spent decades building a quiet but steady presence in Hollywood, appearing in some of the most recognizable films and TV shows of his time. Most people knew his face instantly, even if they never knew his name. And now his story has taken a turn that no one could have imagined, leaving behind shock, speculation, and unanswered questions that continue to circulate online. What happened in Tarzana will likely be examined for a long time, but some details may never fully make sense to the public. And that's what makes it so haunting, because sometimes the people we've seen for years on screen leave the world in ways we were never prepared for,